The golden chandeliers of the Grand Regency Hotel shimmered like frozen suns, casting their glow across silk tablecloths, crystal glasses, and an endless line of white roses that filled the ballroom. It was supposed to be the happiest night of Emily Carter's life. The rehearsal dinner had just ended, laughter still echoing in the corridors, and in less than a week she would walk down this very aisle to marry the man she believed was her forever. Her hands, trembling with a mixture of nerves and joy, brushed against the small velvet box in her purse, a secret only she knew. Inside wasn't jewelry, but a pregnancy test wrapped in tissue paper. Positive. Emily had discovered the news that morning. The pink lines had appeared so fast they almost stole her breath. For years, she had dreamed of being a mother, of rocking a baby in her arms, of building the family she never fully had after losing her own mother to illness. Now, with Ryan Mitchell, the man she thought was her soulmate, everything seemed to fall perfectly into place. She had even imagined how she would tell him tonight after the rehearsal. Maybe slip the test into a gift box, maybe whisper it during their slow dance under the twinkling lights. He would sweep her into his arms, promise to protect her and their child, and their storybook life would begin. But fairy tales are fragile things. The echoes of heels clicking against marble led her toward the dressing suite reserved for the bridal party. She wanted a moment alone before announcing her news. Passing the gilded doors of the wine lounge, she froze at the sound of voices, familiar voices. Ryan's deep, confident tone carried easily, followed by a light, girlish laugh that made Emily's skin prickle. She recognized it instantly. Madison, her maid of honor, her best friend since high school. Curiosity drew Emily closer. She held her breath and leaned just enough to glimpse through the half-open door. Ryan stood with his jacket loosened, his tie undone, one hand cradling a glass of whiskey. Madison leaned against the bar, her red dress scandalously short, her manicured nails grazing his arm. Their faces were too close, their smiles too private. Emily's chest tightened. Maybe they're just joking, she whispered to herself. But then Ryan spoke, his words slicing through her illusions like a blade. She actually thinks I'm going through with this for love. Can you believe it? His laugh was bitter, smug. Emily's family name opens doors. That's all I need. Once I lock down the marriage, the business contracts will flow in. Emily's fingers went numb around her purse. Her legs nearly gave out, but she forced herself still, her heart pounding like a war drum in her ears. Madison giggled, tracing Ryan's lapel. And me? What happens to me after you say, I do? Ryan tilted his glass, smirking. You'll always have me. Emily's just the face I'll parade in public. You're the one I actually want in my bed. The world shattered. Emily felt the weight of her secret pressing against her. The baby, the life growing inside her. Just hours ago she had dreamed of Ryan holding their child. Now all she could see was betrayal. The man who had kissed her forehead, who had promised her forever, was using her as nothing more than a stepping stone. And her best friend, the woman she trusted with every part of her soul, was the accomplice. Her stomach churned. She wanted to scream, to burst into the room and demand answers, but her voice caught in her throat. Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled backward, pressing herself against the wall for balance. She couldn't breathe. The scent of roses suddenly felt suffocating. The glittering chandeliers mocking. Inside, Ryan lowered his voice, but Emily still caught every word. She's so naive. She doesn't even notice when I disappear at night. After the wedding, I'll have everything. Her family's connections, the company's board, the house. She's just convenient, that's all. Madison laughed again, that high, cruel sound that once had been comforting, but now twisted like a knife. Emily's heart cracked. Every sacrifice she had made, the late nights supporting Ryan's ambitions, the patience when he came home late, the faith she had clung to, was nothing but fuel for his lies. And now, carrying his child, she realized the man she loved was a stranger. Her knees buckled, and she clutched the wall as if it could hold her together. A single thought echoed through her mind. I can't let them see me break. With trembling hands, she wiped her tears, forcing her breathing to steady. She would not walk into that room as the broken fiancé. She would not give them the satisfaction. But inside her, the storm raged louder, each wave crashing harder than the last. Emily's secret, the baby, burned in her chest like both a blessing and a curse. For the first time, she doubted whether telling Ryan was even possible. Could she raise this child alone? Could she endure the whispers, the pity, the judgment of a world that would never understand? She backed away from the door, every step heavier than the last, her heart in tatters. The laughter of Ryan and Madison chased her down the hall, ringing in her ears like poison. And in that moment, Emily made a silent vow. She would not let this betrayal define her. She would uncover the truth, and when she did, the entire world would see Ryan Mitchell for who he truly was. But first, she had to survive tonight. Because in just 6 days, she was supposed to marry the man who had already destroyed her. Emily Carter had never been the kind of woman who demanded attention. She wasn't the one who lit up a room with designer gowns or commanding speeches. Instead, she was the quiet force in the background. The woman who listened, who remembered birthdays, who carried the burdens of others while keeping her own pain tucked neatly away. At 26, she had lived a life marked by both loss and quiet perseverance. Her childhood was stitched together with both love and heartbreak. Her father passed away when she was only 8, leaving her mother, Margaret, to raise her alone in their modest home on the edge of town. Margaret was a school librarian, a woman who believed in books, kindness, and resilience. She often told Emily, "Life won't always be fair, sweetheart, but we can choose to be fair to others." Those words became the compass Emily carried into adulthood. But fate had dealt another cruel hand. When Emily was 19, Margaret lost her battle with cancer, leaving Emily with no immediate family. The grief was a shadow that followed her into college, through part-time jobs, and into the uncertain years that came after. She often worked double shifts at the local cafe while tutoring children just to pay her tuition. Her dream was simple: to become a teacher, to give kids the same encouragement her mother once gave her. When she graduated with a degree in elementary education, she felt she had finally begun to carve out a path. Teaching didn't make her rich, but every child's smile was a reward she carried home at night. She adored her students, the way their curiosity sparkled, the way they trusted her to make the world feel safe. Her colleagues admired her patience, often joking that Emily had the heart of a saint. Yet behind that gentle demeanor was a young woman who longed deeply for something she never truly had: stability, family, and the sense of being cherished. So when Ryan Mitchell came into her life, it felt like the answer to every silent prayer. Ryan was everything she thought she needed. Tall, handsome, with a voice that seemed to drip confidence, he swept her off her feet with gestures straight out of a romance novel. Their first date was at a quiet Italian restaurant where he claimed he'd never felt so understood by anyone. Their courtship was fast, intoxicating. Within a year, he was down on one knee, sliding a glittering ring onto her finger, promising her forever. To Emily, Ryan represented safety. He had a stable job in finance, a charming smile that won over her friends, and an ambition that seemed to promise a future free of financial struggles. For someone who had lost so much, the idea of finally being chosen, finally being wanted, was irresistible. She didn't see the cracks at first, the small comments about her simple career, the way he encouraged her to lean on his decisions rather than making her own, the occasional moments where he seemed distant, his phone lighting up with messages he quickly dismissed. Emily told herself every couple had flaws. She convinced herself that love meant patience, that her role was to support, not to question. Because deep down, she was afraid. Afraid of losing someone again. Afraid of returning to the silence of an empty home. Afraid that she wasn't enough. When Ryan suggested a grand wedding at the Grand Regency Hotel, Emily hesitated. It felt too lavish, too unlike her quiet nature. But he insisted, telling her she deserved the best, telling her it was a chance to show the world their love. And Emily, eager to believe in the fairy tale, agreed. Her closest friend, Madison, became her maid of honor. Madison had been with her since high school, through study sessions and heartbreaks, through nights of laughter and tears. Emily trusted her completely, never imagining that the woman she called a sister could be hiding a knife behind her back. By the time the wedding planning began, Emily was already imagining the life to come. A cozy home, a baby's laughter filling the rooms, a husband who would hold her hand through storms. And when she discovered she was pregnant, it seemed like destiny itself was confirming her dream. That morning, when she saw the test turn positive, she pressed a hand over her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She whispered, "Mom, if you can hear me, I'm not alone anymore. I'll be okay." She believed Ryan would be overjoyed. She believed this baby would bind them even closer. But now, after overhearing his betrayal, her entire foundation had cracked. Alone in her dressing suite after fleeing the wine lounge, Emily stared at herself in the mirror. Her reflection was pale, her eyes swollen with unshed tears. She placed a trembling hand over her belly, whispering to the life inside her, "I'll protect you. I promise." The words gave her a flicker of strength, but fear gnawed at her. She thought of the vows she was meant to say in 6 days. She thought of the whispers that would follow if she called off the wedding. She thought of raising a child alone, of fighting against the judgment of a society quick to label women as weak, broken, or foolish. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Ryan. "Dinner went great. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Love you." Emily's stomach churned. How could he write those words while holding another woman in his arms? She wanted to delete the message, but she couldn't. She wanted to scream, but the walls of the suite swallowed her voice. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, clutching her purse where the pregnancy test lay hidden, and wondered how long she could keep pretending. For the first time in years, Emily felt truly cornered, but little did she know, someone else had also seen Ryan's behavior. Someone who would soon become the ally she desperately needed. And when he stepped forward, Emily's life would never be the same again. The Grand Regency Hotel stood like a palace in the center of the city, its marble columns gleaming under the glow of evening lights. It wasn't just a venue, it was a statement. For decades it had hosted the city's most prestigious weddings, galas, and charity balls. The kind of place where crystal chandeliers hung heavy with history, where each hallway whispered stories of wealth and power. For Emily Carter, stepping into the lobby felt like walking into another world. The grand staircase spiraled upward, lined with velvet carpeting so thick her heels sank with each step. Guests who checked in for the rehearsal week moved like royalty, their diamond necklaces catching the light, their designer suits pressed to perfection. Staff members glided silently, anticipating needs before they were voiced. Everything about the hotel radiated luxury. On the surface it was magical, but for Emily it was suffocating. She had grown up in a modest home, where birthdays meant homemade cakes and Christmas meant hand-sewn stockings. The extravagance of the Grand Regency felt alien to her soul, yet Ryan insisted on it. He said their wedding had to be unforgettable, a show of status, something that would impress not just his colleagues, but also her late mother's friends, who still lingered in high society circles. The ballroom reserved for their reception was breathtaking. The ceiling soared 3 stories high, painted with golden murals of cherubs and constellations. A chandelier the size of a small car hung at the center, its crystals sparkling like 1,000 stars. Rows of white roses filled tall glass vases, their fragrance drifting through the air like a spell. Round tables were draped with ivory silk, each set with fine china edged in gold. "It's perfect," Ryan had declared during their tour, his arms snug around her waist. "Nothing less than this will do. Everyone will talk about it for years." Emily had smiled weakly, nodding, though inside she longed for something smaller, something intimate. A garden ceremony, a quiet exchange of vows, a wedding about love, not spectacle. But she pushed those thoughts away. She wanted to please him. She wanted to believe that bending her dreams was part of compromise. The rehearsal had ended hours ago, but the ballroom still echoed with ghosts of laughter and clinking glasses. Emily wandered back into the space alone, her hand unconsciously resting on her belly. In 6 days, she was supposed to stand at the altar under a cascade of roses and pledge her life to a man who had already betrayed her. The thought made her shiver. She walked slowly toward the raised platform where the ceremony would take place. It was framed by an arch of white orchids, their petals so pristine they almost looked artificial. The aisle stretched endlessly, lined with candles and tall glass cylinders. It was beautiful, achingly so. Yet beauty, Emily realized, could also be cruel. It mocked her now, a glittering facade over the cracks of her reality. As she stood there, she imagined the moment everyone dreamed of. The music swelling, her steps measured, Ryan waiting at the end with a smile. But now, when she pictured that smile, all she saw was the smirk he had worn while whispering lies to Madison. Her chest tightened. "Emily?" A voice called gently behind her. She turned to see Daniel Ross, her cousin from her mother's side, watching her with a quiet concern. At 32, Daniel carried himself with the calm authority of someone who had built his own success. A self-made entrepreneur, he was respected in business circles, though he often avoided the spotlight. To Emily, he had always been a steady presence, an older brother figure who checked in on her when life grew heavy. "I didn't think anyone was still here," she said softly, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. "I could ask you the same," Daniel replied, stepping closer. His eyes studied her carefully. "You look pale. Are you all right?" Emily forced a smile. "Just tired. Wedding planning is exhausting." Daniel didn't press, but she could see the doubt flicker across his face. He had always been perceptive, always able to sense when something weighed on her. They walked together across the ballroom, the silence between them filled only by the faint hum of the chandeliers. Finally, Daniel broke it. "You know, Em, a wedding isn't about the size of the room or the number of guests. It's about who's standing beside you. Everything else fades." His words struck something deep inside her, something she was too afraid to voice. She wanted to tell him about what she had overheard, about Ryan, about Madison, about the baby. But fear sealed her lips, fear of judgment, fear of the chaos it would unleash. So she said nothing. Instead, she excused herself and returned to her suite. Yet even within the luxurious walls of her bridal room, she couldn't escape the weight of the hotel. Every corner screamed perfection: gilded mirrors, velvet drapes, monogrammed pillows. It was the kind of place little girls might fantasize about. But to Emily, it felt like a cage. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the gown hanging on the closet door. A masterpiece of lace and satin, custom-made by a designer Ryan had chosen. The dress shimmered under the lamplight, almost daring her to put it on. She should have felt excitement. Instead, her stomach turned. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Ryan. "Don't stay up too late, babe. Tomorrow we meet with the florist. Big day. Love you." The lie clung to each word, suffocating her. She closed her eyes, clutching the test still hidden in her purse. The hotel, the gown, the flowers. All of it was built on illusions, and she was trapped inside. But deep within her, a storm was building. The fragile, trusting girl who once believed in fairy tales was beginning to fracture. Beneath the fear, something else stirred. Anger. Because Emily Carter wasn't just a bride. She was a woman carrying life inside her, and she was beginning to realize she might need to fight for herself and for her child. And the first cracks of that fight would surface sooner than anyone could imagine. On the surface, Ryan Mitchell looked like the kind of man every parent dreamed their daughter would marry. At 30 years old, he had the kind of face that belonged in glossy magazines: sharp jawline, dark hair styled with precision, and eyes that sparkled with charm whenever he wanted them to. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had always been told he was destined for greatness. Ryan had grown up in a wealthy but fractured household. His father, a corporate lawyer, was rarely home, and his mother floated from charity luncheons to cocktail parties, leaving Ryan to be raised by nannies. From a young age, he learned that image was everything. He saw how his parents stayed together, not for love, but for appearances. And somewhere along the way, Ryan decided that emotions were expendable. Success, power, and influence were the only currencies that mattered. When he entered adulthood, he cultivated his persona with meticulous care. He dressed in tailored suits, drove sleek cars, and networked with the right people. At work, he was ambitious, climbing the corporate ladder with a smile that concealed the knives he carried behind his back. To his colleagues, he was that guy, the one who could close a deal with a handshake and charm his way through the toughest negotiations. But behind closed doors, Ryan was a man with a hunger that could never be satisfied. He wanted more money, more recognition, more control, and he didn't care who got crushed along the way. When he met Emily Carter, she seemed like the perfect piece in his puzzle. Sweet, trusting, and carrying a respected family name, she was the kind of woman who would make him look good. Her mother, though gone, had left connections in the city's cultural circles. Emily was also the type of bride who would never overshadow him. Ryan liked that. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a prop. At first, he played the role of devoted fiancé flawlessly. Flowers, candlelit dinners, late-night phone calls, he whispered promises of forever, just enough to win her heart. But while Emily believed in their love, Ryan saw her as a means to an end. To him, marriage wasn't about commitment, it was about leverage. And Madison, the so-called maid of honor, was part of his hidden plan. Madison had always hovered on the edges of Emily's life, basking in her friend's quiet loyalty. But Ryan saw something else in her, ambition, wrapped in beauty. Unlike Emily, Madison wasn't naive. She knew what Ryan wanted, and she wanted a piece of it. Theirs was a dangerous dance built on lust, secrets, and whispered promises. "You'll have the ring, but I'll have your heart," Madison once teased him, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Ryan only smirked. "Emily doesn't need to know. She'll play the perfect bride, while you and I play the game." The truth was, Ryan loved the thrill of it. The deception, the control, the ability to mold two women to his liking. He fed off it like oxygen. Each time he held Madison in private while publicly flaunting Emily, he felt invincible. But what Ryan didn't know was that his arrogance was planting the seeds of his downfall. On the night of the rehearsal dinner, when he whispered to Madison about using Emily for her family name, he wasn't just exposing his cruelty. He was exposing the hollow man he had always been. To him, Emily wasn't a woman carrying his child, she was a pawn. He didn't even consider that she might overhear, that the cracks in his carefully curated mask might finally show. What made Ryan so dangerous wasn't just his betrayal, it was the ease with which he lied. He could send Emily sweet messages in the same hour he was holding Madison close. He could stand at the altar in 6 days and smile as though he meant every vow. He could look into Emily's trusting eyes and promise a life he never intended to give her. Because for Ryan, lies weren't mistakes, they were strategies. In the days leading up to the wedding, he grew bolder. He promised Madison a future behind closed doors, laughing about how easily Emily bought his excuses. He rehearsed his vows with a kind of cruel amusement, altering words in his head to make them sound sincere while knowing they were empty. He even bragged to a colleague that he had married up before the marriage had even happened. The villain wasn't a man who stumbled into infidelity. The villain was a man who planned it, enjoyed it, and believed he would never be caught. Emily, of course, had no idea how deep the rot went. She only knew the fragments she had overheard. What she didn't know, what would soon come crashing down, was that Ryan's betrayal was bigger than one affair. There were deals he had made, lies he had told, and secrets that reached far beyond their relationship. Ryan Mitchell thought he was untouchable. He thought Emily was too weak, too dependent, too naive to ever fight back. But he was wrong. Because while he smirked at his own reflection, convinced of his brilliance, Emily was beginning to see through him. And once the truth began to unravel, not even the chandeliers of the Grand Regency Hotel could hide the darkness he had sown. And soon, the whole world would see the real Ryan Mitchell, starting with the moment his betrayal was dragged into the light. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Grand Regency ballroom, spilling golden light across the polished floors. The hotel staff buzzed like bees, arranging flowers, testing microphones, and preparing for the pre-wedding brunch that Ryan insisted on hosting. It was supposed to be a warm celebration with close family, bridesmaids, and groomsmen, a chance to show off the couple before the big day. Emily stood near the mirror in her suite, smoothing the pale blue dress Ryan had picked for her. Her hair was styled in loose curls, her makeup understated. She looked every bit the glowing bride-to-be. But inside, her chest ached with the weight of what she knew. Each time she placed her hand on her stomach, a flicker of strength pushed back the fear. She was carrying life, hope, something worth fighting for. But how could she reveal it to a man who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone? "Ready, Emily?" Madison's voice chirped through the door. Emily froze. That voice, once comforting, now felt like venom. She forced herself to smile as she opened the door. Madison stood there, dazzling in a red cocktail dress that hugged her figure a little too perfectly. Her eyes sparkled with a secret Emily could now see clearly. "Let's go," Emily whispered, her throat tight. The brunch was held in the side hall of the ballroom, decorated with pastel flowers and crystal glassware. Guests mingled with champagne flutes in hand, laughing and trading stories about the couple. Ryan stood at the center of it all, shaking hands, his smile practiced and flawless. He looked like a man who had everything: success, love, and a future everyone envied. But Emily knew better. She walked in on his arm, smiling as the crowd turned toward them. Cameras flashed, relatives applauded. For a moment she almost convinced herself she could play along, at least until she decided what to do. Then it happened. Halfway through the brunch, when the guests gathered around for Ryan's toast, Emily slipped away to the edge of the room. She needed air. She needed space from the charade. That's when she heard it. The low murmur of Ryan's voice again, just beyond the partition wall separating the hall from the lounge. She wasn't the only one listening. A group of distant cousins had wandered too close, and Emily, hidden behind a column, could hear everything. Ryan's voice was unmistakable, dripping with arrogance. "After this wedding, everything changes. Emily's name will open the doors I've been waiting for. The contracts, the investors, they'll all trust me more with her by my side. And the best part? She doesn't suspect a thing." Madison's laugh followed, high and sharp. "And what about me?" Ryan chuckled. "You'll always be mine. Emily's just convenient. She's soft, pliable, she'll never fight back." Gasps rippled among the cousins who overheard. Their eyes darted toward Emily, who stood frozen behind the column, her hands trembling. The whispers spread quickly, like wildfire, darting from one guest to another. The room's cheerful chatter began to falter, replaced by a strange, uneasy hum. Then fate delivered the final blow. Madison, emboldened by Ryan's arrogance, leaned in and kissed him. Not a peck, not an accident, an intimate kiss that left no doubt about their relationship. And this time, they weren't alone. Dozens of guests had turned in their direction, catching the act in full view. Glasses clinked against the floor as jaws dropped. Someone stifled a scream. The hush spread across the hall, sucking the air out of the celebration. Emily stepped forward before she could stop herself. Her heels clicked against the marble, her blue dress swaying like a flag of betrayal. All eyes snapped toward her. Ryan's face drained of color as Madison stiffened at his side. "Emily?" Ryan began, his voice faltering, but Emily raised her hand, silencing him. Her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. She wanted to shout, to throw the words she had swallowed back into his face, but instead she whispered just loud enough for the crowd to hear. "How long?" The silence deepened. Guests leaned closer, waiting. Ryan stammered, "It's not what it looks like." "Don't lie," Emily cut in, her voice sharp as glass. She turned toward Madison, her former best friend, who looked anywhere but at her. "How long?" Madison's silence was answer enough. The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, accusations. Aunts clutched pearls, uncles shook their heads, and bridesmaids exchanged horrified glances. The perfect couple everyone had admired was unraveling in front of them, and no one could look away. Ryan tried to recover, stepping toward Emily. "Baby, please, let's talk about this privately." But Emily backed away, her hand pressing protectively against her belly. In that moment, the image of a glowing bride was gone. What remained was a woman betrayed, humiliated in the most public way possible. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks as she turned and fled the hall. Gasps followed her, the whispers already turning into rumors that would spread like wildfire beyond the hotel walls. Behind her, Ryan stood frozen, his perfect facade crumbling under the weight of dozens of watching eyes. Madison clutched his arm, but he shook her off, his jaw tightening with fury. The empire he had been building, built on lies and appearances, was beginning to collapse. And Emily? She stumbled into the corridor, her chest heaving, her vision blurred. She wanted to disappear, to curl into herself and hide from the world. But the baby inside her kicked gently, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Her pain was unbearable, her shame suffocating. Yet in that moment of despair, she made a silent vow. She would not let Ryan or Madison break her completely. Still, the question haunted her. How could she possibly survive this storm? Because humiliation was only the beginning, and the darkest nights of her life were still ahead. Emily's heels echoed down the endless corridor of the Grand Regency, her breath ragged as if she had been running for miles. The walls seemed to close in, the golden chandeliers above her blurring into streaks of cruel light. She pushed through the heavy doors of the bridal suite and collapsed against them, her chest heaving, her entire body trembling. For a long moment, she just slid down to the floor, burying her face in her hands. The muffled sounds of music and voices from the ballroom were still faintly audible, like ghosts mocking her. Every laugh, every gasp, every whisper replayed in her mind. The kiss, the betrayal, the way the guests had stared at her with wide eyes, half pity, half fascination. She had become a spectacle. Tears poured down her face in hot streams. She tried to catch her breath, but each sob seemed to claw deeper, tearing through the fragile pieces of her heart. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this to me?" There was no answer, only silence. Her gaze drifted toward the ivory gown hanging in the closet. Hours ago it had represented hope, a new beginning. Now it looked like a cruel joke, a costume for a role she could never play. She pressed a trembling hand against her stomach, where the faintest flutter of life rested. "I thought I was giving you a family," she whispered to the baby, "but all I've given you is pain." The sobs returned, harder this time. She curled into herself on the floor, clutching her knees like a frightened child. Images flashed in her mind, her mother's smile, her father's absence, the empty home she grew up in. She had spent her entire life craving stability, praying for someone to love her without conditions. And now, at the very moment she should have felt safest, she had been betrayed in the most public, humiliating way imaginable. The weight of it pressed down until she thought she might suffocate. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time lost meaning. All Emily knew was the ache in her chest, the hollow throb in her temples, and the gnawing fear that she was utterly alone. A knock came at the door. She didn't answer. Another knock, firmer this time. "Emily?" It was Daniel's voice, steady and calm. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She didn't want him to see her like this, broken, mascara smeared, trembling on the floor. But Daniel wasn't the type to leave. The door creaked open, and he stepped inside quietly. His eyes softened at the sight of her. "Oh, Em?" he murmured, kneeling beside her. She shook her head violently, pulling back. Don't look at me. I can't." But Daniel gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to say anything. I know." Something in his voice cracked through her defenses. She broke again, sobbing uncontrollably as he helped her up onto the edge of the bed. She clung to him like a drowning woman, soaking his suit jacket with tears. For the first time all night, she let herself fall apart completely. "I loved him," she choked out. "I believed him. And Madison, she was supposed to be my sister." Daniel's jaw tightened, his arms steady around her. "They don't deserve your tears. They don't deserve you." But Emily shook her head. "Everyone saw. Everyone knows. How do I come back from this? How do I raise a child alone? They'll laugh at me. They'll say I was too blind, too weak." Her words cracked into silence. Daniel leaned back slightly, searching her face. "You're stronger than you think. You survived losing your parents. You built a life from nothing. And this betrayal says everything about them, and nothing about you." She wanted to believe him, but in that moment she couldn't. Her reflection in the mirror caught her eye. She barely recognized herself. Eyes red and swollen, lips trembling, shoulders slumped. She looked like a woman defeated, a woman undone. The image sliced through her heart. The room spun as panic rose again. Her breaths came faster, shallow and desperate. "I can't do this. I can't." Daniel caught her hands, grounding her. "Emily, breathe. Look at me, in and out. You're not alone. Not now, not ever." Slowly, painfully she steadied. Her sobs quieted to soft whimpers. Exhaustion settled into her bones, leaving her hollow, fragile. She leaned against Daniel's shoulder, whispering, "I don't know how to move forward." "You don't have to figure it out tonight," he replied gently. "But you will. And when you do, Ryan will regret ever underestimating you." Emily closed her eyes. His words were comforting, but the weight of her humiliation remained. In the silence that followed, she wondered if she could ever be whole again. The night dragged on. Long after Daniel left her to rest, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The chandelier above her glittered faintly, mocking her with its beauty. Her thoughts swirled. Ryan's lies, Madison's smirk, the whispers of the crowd. The ache of betrayal was unbearable. But then, faintly, she felt it again, the gentle kick inside her belly. Life reminding her that despair wasn't the end. She placed her hand over the spot, tears filling her eyes once more. "Maybe I can't fight for myself," she whispered, "but I'll fight for you." The vow was quiet, fragile, almost drowned by the storm of her grief. But it was there, a spark waiting to ignite. Still, as she drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought haunted her. What if Ryan wasn't done destroying her? The next morning, the city outside the Grand Regency moved on as if nothing had happened. Cars hummed down the boulevard, businessmen hurried with coffee cups, and the world kept spinning. But inside Emily's suite, time felt frozen. She sat by the window in her robe, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring at the skyline with hollow eyes. Her phone buzzed with messages she couldn't bear to read. Dozens of them, from bridesmaids, from relatives, even from former students who had seen whispers of the scandal creeping across social media. Someone had recorded the moment in the ballroom, and by dawn, clips of Ryan kissing Madison had begun circulating. The betrayal wasn't just whispered gossip anymore. It was public. Emily wanted to crawl under the covers and disappear. She imagined fleeing the city, hiding somewhere no one knew her name. But then she touched her stomach again, feeling the faintest ripple of life. She couldn't run. She couldn't vanish. She had someone else to think about now. A knock at the door startled her. She hesitated, then opened it to find Daniel standing there. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his tie loose, his jaw shadowed with stubble, but his eyes carried a quiet determination. "Can I come in?" he asked. Emily nodded wordlessly. Daniel set a folder on the coffee table, his movements deliberate. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this yet, but after last night, you deserve the truth." Her brows furrowed. "The truth?" He opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, even copies of emails. Emily's stomach twisted as she flipped through them. Pictures of Ryan with Madison at hotels, receipts from expensive dinners, jewelry purchases, all charged to accounts Emily hadn't even known he had. And worse, contracts and memos linking Ryan to shady business deals. Bribery, fraud, deals forged under Emily's family name without her knowledge. Her voice cracked. How did you get this?" Daniel leaned forward. "I've been suspicious for months. Ryan came to me about investing in a partnership. Something about his numbers didn't add up. I hired a private investigator. What I found wasn't just infidelity, it was corruption. He's been planning this wedding not as a commitment to you, but as a cover. Marrying you gives him legitimacy, connections, and access. And Madison? She's not just his mistress. She's his partner in all of it." Emily's hands trembled as she set the papers down. "So everything, all of it, was a lie." Daniel's gaze softened. "Not everything. Your love was real, Emily. That's what makes this so cruel. But Ryan never loved you. He only loved the power you could give him." Her throat tightened, a sob threatened, but no tears came. She had cried them all out the night before. What she felt now was different. It was sharper, cleaner, anger. Daniel's voice grew firm. "You have a choice. You can let him bury you in shame, or you can fight back. You're not powerless. I can help you, but you need to decide." Emily stared at the documents again. The lies, the evidence, the mask Ryan had worn for so long was stripped away on these pages. She thought of his smug smile, the way he had told Madison she was just convenient. She thought of the whispers that had chased her down the hall, the pitying eyes of the crowd. And then she thought of her baby. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "I can't let him ruin us," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Then we start here, quietly, carefully. We build a plan. Ryan thinks you're broken. That's his mistake, because you're stronger than he ever imagined." For the first time since the nightmare began, Emily felt a flicker of power inside her. It was fragile, like the flame of a candle. But it was hers. She lifted her eyes to Daniel. "What do we do first?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "We let him believe he's won. We let him walk into the wedding thinking the world still belongs to him. And then, at the right moment, we take everything back." Emily's breath caught. The thought terrified her, but it also stirred something fierce in her chest. For once, she wouldn't just survive, she would fight. Daniel closed the folder and placed it gently in her hands. "You're not alone, Emily. Not anymore." Her eyes glistened, not with sorrow this time, but with resolve. The pain hadn't disappeared. The humiliation still lingered. But beneath it all, a new version of herself was awakening. One that would no longer be defined by Ryan's betrayal. And though she didn't yet know how, she felt the truth deep in her bones. The man who thought he had broken her was about to face a storm he never saw coming. The days after the brunch scandal blurred together. But for Emily, Each one felt like a step across broken glass. Every time she walked through the Grand Regency, she felt the eyes of guests linger on her. The whispers never stopped. Headlines appeared online. Runaway bride? Mitchell scandal rocks society circles. Even people she had never met seemed to have an opinion about her humiliation. At first, she hid in her suite, blinds drawn, tears spent. She wore her robe for days, eating little, speaking even less. But Daniel never stopped checking in. He brought her meals she barely touched. He sat with her in silence when words were too heavy. And slowly he began to push. "You can't let him win, Em," he said one evening, his voice steady. "You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for your child. Do you want Ryan to raise his head at galas, pretending nothing happened? Do you want Madison to smirk from the shadows, knowing she destroyed you? Or do you want to stand tall, to make them regret ever underestimating you?" Those words struck her deeper than any pitying hug. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, hearing them over and over. Stand tall. Make them regret. The next morning, something shifted. Emily rose earlier than usual, her body still heavy but her heart carrying a spark. She pulled the curtains wide, letting sunlight flood the room. For the first time in days, she showered, letting the hot water wash away not just the grime of despair but also the fragments of who she had been. When she stepped out, wrapped in a towel, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, but there was a new glint in them, a quiet fire. She whispered to her reflection, "You're not broken. Not anymore." With Daniel's help, she began to rebuild. First came the small steps. She left her suite, walking confidently through the hotel lobby, ignoring the stairs. She ordered meals in the dining room instead of hiding behind room service. She sat straighter, spoke firmer. Each act was a rebellion against the version of herself Ryan had expected to see. Weak, defeated, crushed. Then came the makeover. Daniel's connections stretched far, and soon Emily found herself meeting with a stylist and designer team he trusted. At first, she resisted. "I don't need to change how I look. This isn't about vanity," she insisted. But the stylist, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, shook her head. "It's not vanity. It's armor. You've been walking around in Ryan's shadow for too long. It's time to show the world who you are." So Emily allowed them to work. Her soft curls were reshaped into a sleek style that framed her face with quiet power. Her wardrobe, once filled with pastel dresses Ryan preferred, was replaced with bold, elegant pieces. Deep emerald silks, tailored suits, gowns that made her look less like a girl playing bride and more like a woman commanding attention. When she looked in the mirror after the first fitting, she barely recognized herself. But she liked it. The transformation wasn't just physical. Inside, Emily was changing too. She pored over the evidence Daniel had collected, learning every detail of Ryan's schemes. At night, she practiced speaking in front of the mirror, her voice steady, her words sharp. She imagined facing Ryan, not as the trembling fiancé he once mocked, but as a woman holding the truth. And with each passing day, she grew stronger. The staff at the Grand Regency began to notice. They whispered about the bride who had been humiliated, but now walked through the halls with her chin lifted, her eyes steady. Some even smiled at her, quietly rooting for her. For the first time, Emily felt the tide turning. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was becoming a force. Daniel noticed it too. One evening, as they viewed documents together, he leaned back and smiled. "You know, Em, I've never seen you like this before. You're not just surviving, you're leading." She met his gaze, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "Maybe I was always meant to. Maybe I just needed the right reason." Her reason was clear, her child. She wouldn't let Ryan's lies taint their future. As the wedding day loomed closer, Ryan continued strutting through the hotel as though nothing had happened. He sent Emily texts, pretending innocence, spinning stories about how the kiss with Madison had been a misunderstanding, a mistake. "I love you, Em," he wrote. "Let's put this behind us." But Emily no longer flinched at his words. She read them with a cold smile, then deleted them. Ryan didn't know it yet, but his empire was crumbling. The night before the wedding, Emily stood before the mirror in her new gown. Not the ivory lace Ryan had chosen, but a sleek black dress Claire had designed just for her. It hugged her figure, bold and unapologetic, shimmering under the light like armor. She touched her stomach gently, whispering, "We're gonna be okay, I promise." Her reflection didn't look fragile anymore. She looked like someone ready for battle. Daniel stepped into the room, his eyes widening. "Emily, you look unstoppable." She turned to him, her voice calm, steady. "Tomorrow isn't about vows anymore. It's about truth. Ryan wanted a show? I'll give him one." Daniel nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. "Then let's make sure everyone's watching." Emily lifted her chin, the fire in her chest burning brighter than ever. For the first time she felt ready, not just to face Ryan, but to destroy the illusion he had built. And as midnight neared, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Tomorrow, in front of everyone, Ryan Mitchell's empire of lies would finally collapse. The morning of the wedding dawned with clear skies, as if the universe itself had prepared a perfect backdrop for what was about to unfold. The Grand Regency glittered under the sunlight, its marble pillars draped with white silk, the grand ballroom transformed into a vision of fairy tale romance. Rows of orchids lined the aisle, and a quartet tuned their instruments with quiet precision. Guests arrived in gowns and tuxedos, whispering excitedly, the sting of scandal from the rehearsal brunch still fresh in their minds. Ryan Mitchell stood at the altar, his tuxedo flawless, his smile rehearsed. To anyone who didn't know better, he looked like the picture of confidence. But inside, his nerves pulsed. He hadn't heard from Emily since the brunch. She had ignored his calls, dodged his texts, yet he was certain she would appear. She had to. Without her, his plans, his deals, his carefully constructed image would collapse. Beside him, Madison smirked from her seat in the front row, dressed in a slinky champagne-colored gown. She thought she had already won, that she was the true queen of his world. Together, they had laughed at how easily Emily had cracked. But Ryan had underestimated the woman he had betrayed. The doors at the back of the ballroom swung open, and a hush swept over the crowd. Heads turned, whispers rose, cameras clicked. Emily Carter stood framed in the doorway, not in the ivory lace gown Ryan had chosen, but in a sleek black dress that shimmered under the chandeliers like liquid midnight. Her hair was styled elegantly, her eyes lined with quiet fire. She walked down the aisle not as a trembling bride, but as a warrior. Every step echoed with defiance. Every gaze she met faltered. By the time she reached the altar, the ballroom was silent, save for the clicking of cameras desperate to capture the moment. Ryan forced a smile, his voice tight. "Emily, you look stunning." She didn't return the smile. Instead, she turned toward the guests. Her voice rang clear, steady. "Thank you all for being here today. I know you came to witness a wedding, but before vows are spoken, there's something you need to see." A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Ryan's smile faltered. "Emily, let's talk about this later." She raised a hand, silencing him. Then she gestured to Daniel, who stepped forward from the side of the room. In his hands was a small projector, already connected to the ballroom's giant screen. He nodded at Emily, and with the press of a button, the screen lit up. Gasps filled the air. Photo after photo appeared. Ryan and Madison together in hotel lobbies, caught in intimate embraces. Receipts for jewelry and hotel suites, all charged to accounts in Emily's name. Screenshots of Ryan's emails, bragging to business partners about how marrying Emily would secure contracts and legitimacy. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Faces turned toward Ryan with disbelief, disgust, even pity. Emily's voice cut through the chaos. "This is the man I was supposed to marry. The man who kissed my maid of honor behind my back, who used my family's name to build his empire of lies. He thought I was weak. He thought I would stay silent. But today, in front of all of you, I choose the truth." Her words landed like blows. Ryan lunged toward her, his voice desperate. "This is ridiculous. She's lying. This is all fake." But Daniel stepped forward, holding up notarized copies of the documents. "Everything here has been verified. I'd advise you to stop before you incriminate yourself further, Mitchell." Madison's face drained of color. The smirk that had lingered for days vanished. Guests stared at her with open contempt. She shrank back into her chair, realizing her throne had been nothing but borrowed power. Ryan turned back to Emily, his voice cracking. "Emily, please, don't do this. We can fix it. I love you." Emily met his gaze, her expression unflinching. "You love power, you love control, but you never loved me." The ballroom erupted in applause, not polite, but thunderous, raw. Guests rose to their feet, some cheering, others shouting words of encouragement. For the first time, Emily wasn't the object of pity. She was the victor. Ryan stood frozen, humiliated, his carefully constructed facade shattered before the very people he had sought to impress. Madison slipped out of the room, her head bowed, her heels clicking against the marble like a retreat. Emily turned once more to the crowd. Her voice softened, but it carried strength. I came here today ready to make vows, but not to him. I make them to myself. To never let anyone silence me again. To fight for my child, for my future, for the life we deserve. Her hand rested gently on her stomach. Whispers rippled through the audience as realization dawned. Emily was pregnant. The betrayal was even deeper than they had imagined, and the courage she showed now was beyond what anyone expected. The applause swelled again, filling the grand ballroom with thunder. Ryan, his face pale, stumbled backward. Security approached discreetly at Daniel's signal, ready to escort him if needed. For the first time in his life, Ryan Mitchell was powerless. Emily stood tall at the altar, no longer a bride abandoned, but a woman reborn. The chandeliers above sparkled, no longer mocking her, but crowning her in their light. And as the cameras flashed, capturing every second of Ryan's downfall and Emily's rise, she knew the world would never see her as weak again. Because today wasn't the day she became a wife. Today was the day she became unstoppable. When the ballroom finally emptied, the echoes of applause still lingered like music in Emily's ears. The once perfect wedding had transformed into something far greater. A reckoning. The flowers still stood, the chandeliers still glittered, but the illusion had been destroyed. Ryan had been escorted out by security, his protests drowned beneath the roar of guests condemning him. Madison slipped away in shame, her once proud stride reduced to hurried steps of defeat. And Emily had walked out not as a bride abandoned, but as a woman who had reclaimed her voice. Outside the hotel, the city buzzed with energy. News outlets had already begun broadcasting the story. Headlines flashed across phones. Bride exposes groom's betrayal in stunning public showdown. Emily's name trended on social media, but this time it wasn't as a victim. It was as a symbol. A woman who refused to bow to humiliation. Back in her suite, she finally allowed herself to exhale. The exhaustion was bone deep, but beneath it was relief. She had faced her worst fear, public betrayal, and survived. More than that, she had turned it into power. Daniel entered quietly, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He set one beside her and sat across from her, studying her face. How do you feel? Emily considered the question. Her body was drained, her emotions raw, but when she touched her stomach, she felt something new. Hope. Like I can breathe again, she whispered. Daniel nodded. You were extraordinary, Em. I've never seen anyone face humiliation like that and turn it into victory. Her lips curved into a faint smile. I didn't feel extraordinary, I felt terrified. But then I thought, if I let fear win, Ryan wins, and I couldn't let that happen. They sat silent for a moment, the weight of everything settling between them. Finally, Emily spoke again. Do you think people will forget? Daniel shook his head. They won't forget, but they'll remember you for the right reasons. Not as the woman who was betrayed, but as the woman who fought back. His words sank deep, anchoring her in a new truth. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was leading her own life, on her own terms. The days that followed confirmed it. Ryan's empire crumbled quickly. With Daniel's evidence in hand, legal teams swooped in. His fraudulent deals unraveled, investors pulled out, and contracts were dissolved. Madison tried to distance herself, but her name was tied too tightly to his schemes. Together, they became examples of greed and betrayal. Their downfall splashed across headlines with ruthless clarity. Emily, meanwhile, found herself surrounded by support. Letters poured in from women across the country. Some she knew, most she didn't. Messages of solidarity, of admiration, of gratitude. You gave me courage to leave my cheating husband. You reminded me I'm worth more. You showed me strength I didn't think I had. For the first time, Emily realized her pain had not been wasted. It had become a torch others could see in their own darkness. She returned to teaching. Her classroom once again filled with laughter and tiny voices. Her students didn't care about the headlines. They only cared that Miss Carter was there, smiling, guiding them, loving them. The stability she longed for was not in Ryan's false promises, but in the simple joy of shaping young lives. Months later, Emily stood in a small garden, sunlight warming her shoulders. The air smelled of lilacs, the ground soft beneath her sandals. She wore no gown, no jewels, no veil. Instead, she wore a flowing dress, comfortable and free. Around her, close friends and colleagues gathered for a quiet celebration, not of a wedding, but of life. Daniel stood beside her, not as a savior, but as a partner who had walked beside her through fire. He held her hand gently as she spoke to the group. "I thought my story ended the night I was betrayed," Emily said, her voice carrying across the garden. "But sometimes endings are just beginnings in disguise. I lost what I thought was love, but I found something greater. Myself. And I found the strength to build a life worth living, for me and for my child." She touched her rounded belly, smiling as the baby kicked softly. Tears shimmered in the eyes of those listening. "I want every woman here to remember this," Emily continued. "We are not weak because someone betrayed us. We are not broken because someone lied. We are strong because we choose to rise. And no one, no man, no betrayal, no humiliation, can take that away." The garden filled with applause, softer than the ballroom thunder but richer, deeper. This was not the applause of scandal. This was the applause of respect. Later, as the sun dipped low, Daniel joined her at the edge of the garden. "You did it, Em. You turned pain into power." She leaned her head against his shoulder, a soft smile playing on her lips. "No," she corrected gently. "We did it, and now we begin again." The future stretched wide before her, uncertain but full of possibility. She no longer feared it. She no longer needed Ryan's shadow or Madison's approval. She had herself, her child, and a community that saw her strength. The world had tried to break her, but instead it had revealed who she truly was. And as twilight settled over the garden, Emily whispered to her unborn child, words only the two of them could share. "We are free. We are strong, and our story is only beginning." So that's how Emily's story came to an end. But my dear friends, if you're still here with me right now, it means something in her journey touched your heart in a very real way. Maybe you've faced betrayal yourself. Maybe you've been underestimated. Or maybe you felt broken when life didn't go the way you planned. If so, I want you to pause and let this story remind you of something powerful. You are stronger than you think. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That's exactly what Emily discovered. She couldn't control Ryan's lies, Madison's betrayal, or the whispers of society, but she could control how she responded. Instead of staying silent, she rose. Instead of collapsing, she transformed. And that choice, to rise when everything pushes you down, is something each of us can make in our own lives. Seneca also said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." Pain is not wasted if we use it to grow. Emily's heartbreak became her fuel. Her humiliation became her turning point, and her scars became her strength. That is the lesson we can all carry. The very moment you think you are defeated might just be the moment you are being remade. So my friends, if Emily's journey spoke to you, if it gave you hope, courage, or just a reminder that you are not alone, then let's carry this message forward together. Like this video if it moved you, share it so someone else can find light in their darkness. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because here we believe in stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of who we really are. And remember, no betrayal, no hardship, no storm can define you. Only you can.